What's going on, guys? It's Mirwin. Today we're going to dissect my song, Fairy Tales. So if you guys haven't been watching the YouTube channel, we have our series Dissect, inspired by the podcast on Spotify, where I talk about the production, the lyrics, the backstory behind the music I make. Today we're going to be doing my song Fairy Tales off of my new album, Strangers in the Dark. If you guys haven't listened to this album or this song, definitely encourage you guys to check it out. We got a link in the description. You can listen to this song right now, but you don't have to before you watch the rest of the video. We're just going to get straight into it today. So every episode of Dissect, we have 6 questions we ask about every song. So the first question we're going to be asking today is, what's the heart behind the song? So if you've watched any of the past Dissect videos, you'll kind of hear me talk about kind of the whole message and theme of this album is, you know, everybody has a story. Do you see it? Do you believe it? We're all strangers in the dark. Kind of that's where the title idea comes from. So one of the things I knew while I kind of came up with this concept for the album, the theme and things like that, was that I wanted to have at least one more storytelling driven song. So storytelling, definitely a huge part of hip hop and rap. You know, storytelling songs have always been a huge part also of rap. You know, you think of in recent years, you know, you got like The Art of Peer Pressure from Kendrick. J. Cole has like Tale of Two Cities. You know, all these different elements. Definitely a very big part of hip hop. You know, just kind of those storytelling driven songs. You know, something that, you know, definitely isn't a super big thing in rap right now, but something that I wanted to include in this album. I was definitely inspired a lot by, if you know, have read the Bible or have gone to church or anything, you know, Jesus a lot of times when he was talking with the crowds, he used parables to kind of get his point across. And I was definitely very inspired by that. I think, you know, wanting to get that message across through this album of, you know, everybody has a story. I was trying to think of ways to tell that message without being too heavy-handed, and I think one of the best ways to get a message across, period, is to tell it by using a story as like the device to tell it. So this song is definitely one where I wanted to tell a story that would really kind of get the listener engaged and kind of get both sides of, you know, well, we talk about the song in a second here, but both sides of, you know, who I'm talking about in this song, to, you know, empathize with each other and, you know, to empathize kind of, you know, with themselves and other people that might be in this situation. So definitely something that I was inspired by there with, you know, the parables and things like that. So I definitely wanted to bring that into this album, you know, to kind of drive that point through the album by just, you know, telling a story, you know, telling someone else's story, you know, from, you know, in an artistic way, you know, and being inspired by, you know, what they've gone through and things like that. So that being said, kind of the heart, you know, kind of the two different stories kind of going on in this song. We have this first half here with, you know, the horns and stuff like that. So that this first half is told from the perspective of someone who is struggling with, you know, some eating disorders, you know, body, I think dysmorphia would be the correct term, which is obviously something that, or maybe not obviously would be the correct thing, but something that I have not personally struggled with. So while I was writing this song, you know, I was reading some articles, you know, really trying to understand and, you know, do my homework, you know, and, you know, I watched like, you know, a bunch of different like videos from people that have gone through these things on YouTube to really understand what was going through their mind and what led them, you know, what was going on while they were in that place, how they got out of it, you know, what was going on before and after and things like that. Because, you know, obviously those are very difficult situations, very difficult, you know, diseases and disorders to go through. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing, you know, my part to really honor that and tell their story well. You know, like I said, I watched like 5 or 6 different, you know, YouTube videos from people who have gone through that, you know, that are, you know, pretty long, but definitely was very touched by their stories and, you know, wanted to share that with the world. And, you know, try and, you know, use that, you know, to, you know, A, shed light on what they've gone through, but also B, you know, kind of, again, get people to empathize with them and with each other. So that's what this first, like, half of the song is about, is telling someone's story about someone going through that that situation. And then the second half of this song is about something that is more personal to me. So this is about, you know, so this is kind of a male-female kind of song, where the first half, you know, obviously, you know, these issues aren't limited to female, and, you know, these issues aren't limited to male, but, you know, they just traditionally kind of have. So the second half is more so about, you know, I talk about, you know, I was a boy with a body bag, habits unhealthy, buried my emotions, couldn't touch them, no one let me. So this is more so about like the emotional trauma and like burying your emotions, learning how to process your emotions, something that, you know, in our culture, you know, as, you know, young men and stuff like that, you know, that, you know, we are not, you know, really taught a lot by, you know, the people we look up to, or just the culture in general. You know, like I say, you know, kind of the toughen up aspect of, you know, what, you know, we're told to do. So the second verse is more so inspired by my personal, what I've gone through, learning how to process my emotions, how I've seen people in my life do that. So that's what the second verse is about, or third verse technically, but like the second part of the song is about. And that's kind of, again, telling that from, you know, inspired by what I've gone through, and also, you know, doing some more research in that aspect as well. Just to, again, kind of get people to empathize with both sides of these situations, and, you know, just in general empathize more with people through these two stories. And then, yeah, so that's kind of the two different stories going on here. And then, yeah, that's kind of just, you know, the concept for this song is just telling those two stories, hoping that people, you know, resonate with them and empathize, kind of hear it, and then go and, you know, be able to, you know, care for people more, empathize with people going through those situations. Next question here is going to be, what's your favorite part lyrically? So for this song, like I mentioned in a couple other videos, I think this was a song where, you know, the most important part of writing this was to make sure the story was told well, and that, you know, that was the core focus of the song, was the story and, you know, what I was saying, not necessarily that, you know, showing off any lyrical, you know, prowess, or like, you know, like, oh, you know, here's like a really good punchline or things like that, which, you know, obviously, you know, I'm gonna do my thing, but I think the main point of all my verses was to, you know, communicate those experiences that these people I've gone through, these people have gone through, and, you know, make sure they're told well. So that's the main point lyrically. I'm looking through some of the things that I think, you know, I like about both of these. I think this beat for the first half was definitely a little bit different. You know, like I say, we got the dance drums on it, kind of the house inspired drums on it. It was definitely has the melody with the horns has a little bit of different like rhythm and like pocket, so it was a little different to rap over. There are some references in this that I think I really like. I think the first line in the first verse, "I'm sorry it's like this, I feel for you, Aunt." I really like this line. This whole idea, I think, was definitely inspired a lot, or at least I drew some inspiration from Andre 3000's verse on Frank Ocean's album Blonde. So I believe it's on the solo reprise, which is one of my favorite tracks actually on the album Blonde. But he has a little section in that song where he uses that exact line, and he's using it in reference to, he talks a little bit about how he, you know, again, maybe a little bit almost in a similar vein, he talks about how, you know, women going through, you know, all these, not necessarily stereotypes, but pressures about their appearance and, you know, how to look, and, you know, and then he talks about maybe a little bit of like the double-edgedness of, like, you know, wanting to be real, but also all, you know, wanting to be seen a certain way and stuff like that. So he uses this line, "I'm sorry it's like this, I feel for you, Aunt," and then he goes on, "I don't know what it's like with a skirt on." So I was kind of inspired by that. I was inspired by that line and chose to draw it in and kind of reference it in this one, again, because, you know, kind of setting up this whole first half of, you know, I have not gone through these things, I don't know what it's like, but you know, from what, you know, I've read and experienced, this is what, you know, I have taken away from it. I want to tell your story, all that stuff. You know, even that first section there after it, "I know there's family who don't understand. I'm sharing your pain, hoping to explain what it's like to grow up in a culture of shame." So, you know, again, just really trying to tell their story through this. Obviously, every situation is different. You know, not everyone that has, you know, gone through these things has gone through it because of, you know, whatever, or all these things. There are definitely, you know, from the videos I've watched, and obviously my experience learning about it is also limited, but, you know, there are some things that, you know, I was like, okay, these are like common threads, or this is a lot of what they felt while they were doing this. So, you know, choosing to include those things, you know, and again, trying to tell these people's stories, and, you know, kind of the things surrounding this disorder, you know, trying to tell that well, at least, you know, to the best of my ability. Some of the other references I really like in this, so we got the "feel like Slim, sweater covered in vomit, throw it in the trash, hide it from my mama. Beauty is pain deep down, if I'm honest, I don't know how to escape this trauma." So that reference there, talking about, you know, Eminem, obviously a huge icon, big figure in hip hop, not maybe so much anymore, but definitely, you know, early on in the 2000s, 90s. Also, he has the that line in "Lose Yourself," vomit on your sweater already, mom spaghetti. So kind of a reference to that, while tying it into, you know, a lot of these videos, you know, talking about, you know, the self-induced vomiting and things like that they went through. to kind of like, that were part their solution and, in their mind, their solution to their problem, but also was part of like their coping and like part of their symptoms and things like that. So, kind of tying in that reference there, I think was pretty cool, just from an artistic point of view. And then something I like a lot, kind of just, there's, like I say, this beat was definitely very different from the rest of the album. So that being said, I was able to do a little bit of different flows. So I think, this next, like with the second verse, they say you can't have your cake and eat it too. That might be true for you. For me, it's self-induced. Skipping breakfast reckless just to lose a couple pounds in the mirror, and I hate the view. So, kind of being able to do a little bit of a quicker flow there, a little more machine gun, and then, kind of flipping that saying of you can't have your cake and eat it too, and then flipping it and tying it into this situation where that literally is true, and then, kind of tying it into, the backdrop of what's going on behind that, and then ending that verse there with, wanting to escape it but not knowing how, trying to find healing, how do I get out of this, kind of mindset or, this thing that I'm going through, the situation. So that's kind of how that verse ends. And then moving on lyrically to the last verse here. So this is the one that I, probably talking more about my experiences. I think my favorite parts here are going to be the very last part where I kind of tie both sections of this song together, and then this section here, where so I like the line, I was a boy with a body bag, habits unhealthy, buried my emotions, couldn't touch them, no one let me. So we got this image here, we kind of use the phrase a lot of burying your emotions. So I kind of brought this image of, a young, myself, a young person, a young child, with a body bag, which is typically, someone who's died, burying your emotions, kind of tying in that imagery there, I thought was really cool. And then I got this next line here, which I thought, and this might maybe come off a little bit as a diss, but it isn't really. This is about, my dad here. I can count on 3 fingers all the times I've seen my dad cry. First his dad died, then our dog died, then he came home, I didn't ask why. I wonder how he grew up as a kid, is he traumatized? So this, maybe to some people this could kind of seem like, a little bit of somewhat in the vein of a diss, but to me this is more, what I mean by this line and why I included it was more so of the, this is, especially from this subject of, bearing your emotions as men and what, we have been taught by our fathers and, the men in our lives of bearing your emotions, kind of trying to connect those two dots a little bit of, hey, we talk a lot about, maybe like on Twitter you see people talking about, oh yeah, my dad or my father, A, B, and C, they just didn't do this, so that's the way I am. I've included that line just kind of to get people thinking of, well, yes, that could be true, but also probably the person their dad, their mom, the person before them probably did the same thing to them, that's why they are. So trying to extend some empathy to that side. I think a lot of times, we expect the empathy for us, but we don't necessarily give it to others. So I think, I include that line just to kind of, and the last line there, I wonder how he grew up as a kid, is he traumatized? Trying to tie that in, not necessarily make it in a, why don't you, A, B, C, D, whatever, but kind of being like, hey, there are things that I've gone through and have made me react to things a certain way. I'm sure there are things about my dad or other people in my life that have made them learn how to react in a certain way or tend to react in a certain way. So trying to, extend some empathy to the other side, kind of in that line there, or, trying to get people to think that way. And then the last part here that I really like is this one where, I kind of tie together this whole concept and, tie it into the title of Fairy Tales. Beauty and the Beast, to which do we relate? A misunderstood outcast, desperate for a change, be accepted for himself despite all of the pain, and learn to live freely, escape from all the chains. So again, a device I'm using in this section is just the repetition to get the point across. The first time I do it, I'm talking about the guy. So, this verse that, is more centered on my experience. And second verse, second repetition, we're talking about the girl. And the first and second verse, talking about her experience. So kind of connecting it there and using that like fairy tale imagery of the Beauty and the Beast, and kind of tying it to both of them. I thought it was cool, kind of taking both sides of them and not necessarily saying, oh, the beauty is the girl and the beast is the, you know, the guy or whatever, but kind of connecting it to both of them, where it's like, hey, you know, Beauty and the Beast is kind of just this idea of everybody, you know, has that thing they're struggling with, you know, and then just kind of connecting it to, you know, both sides of this coin, or both characters in this story have things they're struggling with, and again, just trying to get people to empathize with both of those. So I thought that was really cool, and just being able to, you know, again, tie into that concept of fairy tales. Kind of the initial idea for this song that I had was trying to do something like that, where the two characters were connected and we were telling two sides of a story. But as I've started writing for the album, and I wanted it to kind of be more like a love song, you know, like say the fairy tales idea, but I felt like that was too similar to two words. So I kind of was like, all right, I want to do a story, but I wasn't sure what it was. And then, you know, I believe someone was sharing their story about, like, you know, their eating disorder on TikTok, and that kind of just inspired me to, I was really just moved by it, and I was like, okay, maybe I could tell this story, learn more about it, you know, try and tell it through the music. So I think, you know, it was cool to be able to, you know, kind of, you know, tell their story through this song. That being said, like I said, that was probably the longest answer to the questions in this video, but moving on to the next question. What's your favorite part musically? So just kind of looking at the song chronologically, I think I really love the orchestra sample that I had at the beginning here, paired with that, you know, that voiceover sample that I got recorded with the dialogue. I think really just helped kind of get that fairy tale feeling, you know, just kind of, you know, makes sense, you know, also sonically with, you know, the theme of the song. So I really like that. You know, the sample that I used for the first half with the horns is definitely very unique, so, you know, that's pretty cool. I definitely like that. I think something I really like with my verse, the third verse, is the sample being able to tie it in with the title of the song. So if you listen to the sample, the vocal is saying, it's just a fairy tale, and then it's got a couple other lines in there. The original song that I sampled is actually titled Fairy Tale. So that was, again, a situation where the title, I already had the title idea for this song, maybe not necessarily the whole concept. I had the title Fairy Tales, so seeing that, I was like, oh, this would be cool to tie it in, and you know, got it to work with the second half of the, you know, with my verse. So definitely also something I really like, just being able to tie that in with the theme of the song, just a little extra detail, you know, just to kind of, you know, keep, you know, elevate the song, kind of, again, connect it with the message and the theme. So definitely like that as well. I also like the drums on that section as well too. Then moving on here to the next question is going to be, how long did it take you to make? So this is a beat that, again, if you watch the past Dissect videos, you know, you'll remember me saying, you know, this whole album took me about 4 months to make creatively. So this is a beat that definitely, you know, took a little bit longer to make. Probably closer to the 3 months section to finish out the whole song, from, you know, making the beat, recording, writing, you know, all that stuff, sending it off to my engineer. Shout out Shane, kills it for me every time. Make sure to show him some love. He actually engineered this entire album, so definitely make sure to show him some love in the comments. But I think the challenge of this one was, you know, I got this initial sample with the horns for the first section, and then just, you know, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to chop it or if I had a loop. I ended up looping it, but I felt like it was kind of repetitive, so trying to find ways to, you know, bring energy in, elements to take in, take out, you know, and those dance drums I think did a good job of bringing in some extra energy, but also still having the song build and progress. I knew I wanted to build and progress, so I didn't necessarily just want to be, all right, the drums are in, do we just keep them in the whole time? So it took a little bit longer, but I would say around, you know, closer to like the 2-3 month range, I think. Next question is going to be, was there any musical inspiration for this song? So like I say, I think the main musical inspiration here, like I say, we got those house dance style drums in this song again, kind of like we did in title track. So that's definitely an inspiration here, just trying to do some different drums. I think that was definitely an inspiration. I think other than the sample, you know, like I say, the original intro sample, I definitely wanted to kind of get that fairy tale-esque feeling. So that was definitely an inspiration, kind of drawing on like some movie soundtracks. You kind of think of like Disney and like, you know, Cinderella, things like that. I felt like it kind of felt like that. So that was definitely an inspiration. And then otherwise, you know, just my verse for the very end, for the third verse, I think was just, again, being inspired by like all these artists I've looked up to, you know, in hip hop, you know, Drake, Kendrick, all these people, you know, J. Cole, Chance, all these different people, and just trying to do something that I felt like, you know, kind of was inspired by what they've done, but while still being true to me and what I've created. So I think that was also definitely an inspiration for that last section there. Last question here is going to be, what was the hardest part of making the song? So for this one, the hardest part, I think this was definitely one of the more difficult songs to write on this album, if not the most difficult song to write. I think purely just from not even just writing, but just finishing, this is the song that I, am probably the least confident in of all the songs, just because of how different it is. It's got the storytelling element, which, traditionally, or at least in recent years, isn't a very trendy thing to do in rap. It's not as opposed to like, other things. The storytelling songs typically don't stream very well. Also, they're typically more open to criticism on a storytelling song than maybe something else. So this is a song that personally I felt probably the least confident in releasing as part of the album, but I also felt like the story was important and, also helped, with the message of the album and the theme, so I felt like it was still important to include. But I think it was very difficult. The beat had some challenges with it, trying to figure out how to do the drums, how to keep the song interesting and progressing, and then also just really lyrically, like I said, really honoring these experiences that people have gone through with this these disorders and these body image issues that all of these people have gone through and shared, through their videos and articles and things like that. And really just trying to do right by that and, share, tell that story in a good way, while also not, being overtly stereotypical, trying to really understand and not, just, surface level, this is, not surface level understand the issue, but just really, trying to tell it, and, really put the effort in, do the work for that story, so that it gets the correct attention that it deserves. So that was definitely a hard part of this song, and I think also just trying to tell it in the stories on both of these halves, so like both sides of the coin, in a way that again, was really just was personal and really wasn't too heavy-handed with like a message, quote unquote, or was really just trying to let the story do the heavy lifting. And let that be what gets, kind of the gears turning in the listener's mind of, everybody has a story, do see it, do believe it, and not being, so, on the nose, I guess, of, starting out, I don't know how that would have been, but I think that could have been a way I could have gone, and just trying to, keep it, in the vein of the story and stay focused on that, as opposed to I guess that's probably what I would say, staying focused on the story as opposed to staying focused on the message and letting the story tell the message, as opposed to letting the message form the story, if that makes sense. So I think that was definitely a challenge, trying to, basically just honor the story and do it right on both halves, trying to, my experience from, my growth and what I've seen, different people in my life, and also, just the stories and experiences people have shared, online that I've been, able to hear from. So I think that was definitely the hardest part of making this song, was just, the writing and, trying to make it to that level where it was good, the story, like it had the right amount of effort behind it. That is going to be it for this episode of Dissect, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't listened to this song or my album Strangers in the Dark, we got a link in the description. Definitely encourage you guys to go check that out. Super proud of this album. It means a lot to me if you listen to it. Appreciate everyone who listens to my music. That's going to be it for this episode of Dissect, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.